There's a clock that doesn't measure time. It measures how close we are to ending ourselves, and right now, it's closer than it's ever been. I've covered enough conflicts to know the weight of a decision made in a room where nobody's watching. January 1947. That's when it started, not with sirens or manifestos, but with a group of physicists in Chicago, the same men who'd built the bomb, sitting down to ask themselves a harder question than how to build it. How do we live knowing we can end the world? They created the Doomsday Clock. Not a real clock, a metaphor, but metaphors, I've learned, are sometimes the only honest language we have left. The clock's hands move closer to midnight as existential risk increases. Closer to zero means closer to catastrophe. When those physicists set it in 47, they put it at 7 minutes to midnight. 7 minutes. They knew what they'd unleashed. They weren't celebrating, they were confessing. What struck me, reading the logbook myself years later, was the precision of their fear. They didn't say we're worried. They quantified it. They made it visible. Because here's what I've learned covering war zones: abstract danger paralyzes. Concrete measurement focuses the mind. The clock forced humanity to ask, what are we actually counting down to? Nuclear weapons weren't the only threat, though. By the 1980, during the height of the Cold War, the clock hit 2 minutes to midnight. 2 minutes. The Soviets and Americans were pointing enough firepower at each other to sterilize the planet. But here's what people missed. The clock was already tracking something else. Climate change, biological weapons, the slow erosion of institutions. Humanity had given itself multiple ways to fail. I want to pause here because this is where most people get the story wrong. They think the Doomsday Clock is prophecy. A prediction. It's not. It's measurement. The difference matters. Prophecy is passive. It tells you what will happen. Measurement is active. It tells you what we've chosen right now at this moment with our current trajectory. The clock is a mirror, not a crystal ball. In 2018, the Bulletin of the atomic scientists moved it to 2 minutes to midnight again. Same as the Cold War. But the committee said something that haunted me. We live in a world of unchecked technological power and global instability. Not one threat, plural, interconnected. Like watching a building with multiple fires burning simultaneously, and you can't tell which one will collapse the structure first. Here's what I've never forgotten from my years in the field. People don't change because of statistics. They change because of proximity, because they see it, because they feel the weight of a single decision. The Doomsday Clock tries to do that, to make the abstract visceral, to say, this isn't happening to someone else somewhere else. This is us, now. The clock has moved backward before. In 1991, after the Cold War ended, they set it to 17 minutes to midnight. The furthest from catastrophe it's ever been. Not because the threats disappeared, because we made deliberate choices, treaties, dialogue, institutions that held. For a moment, humanity chose differently. But we're not there anymore. In 2023, the Bulletin moved it to 90 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been. And what did they cite? Nuclear escalation in Ukraine, unchecked artificial intelligence, climate tipping points, the breakdown of norms around biological research. Not one existential threat, a constellation of them, all accelerating simultaneously. This is where Stoicism enters the room, and it's not what you think. The Stoics didn't preach passivity. They preached clarity about what you control and what you don't. You can't control whether nuclear war happens, but you can control your attention, your choices, your responsibility to act within your sphere of influence. The clock is telling us the time for abstraction is over. I've sat in rooms where decisions were made that affected thousands of lives. What I learned, most people in power aren't monsters. They're overwhelmed. They have incomplete information. They're trapped in systems bigger than they are. The Doomsday Clock isn't an accusation. It's a call to systemic thinking, to asking, how do we redesign the structures we've inherited? The clock reveals something darker, though. We've known about these threats for decades. Nuclear weapons since 1945. Climate change since the 1970. Pandemic risk since at least 2000. The Doomsday Clock hasn't been moving backward because we've been choosing denial over action. Not always maliciously. Sometimes just inertia. The weight of existing systems. But here's what I've also witnessed. Change accelerates. It doesn't happen linearly. One person sees something, then 10, then 100, then suddenly the consensus shifts. The Berlin Wall fell not because it was inevitable, but because enough people decided it had to. The Doomsday Clock is counting down, yes, but it's also asking, what will we need to decide right now to move it backward again? That's the existential question at the heart of this. Not will we survive, but what kind of beings do we become in the choosing? The Stoics called this virtue. The philosophers call it authenticity. I call it the only thing that matters. Because even if the clock reaches midnight, the question of how we lived, what we chose when we knew better, that doesn't disappear. The Doomsday Clock isn't a prophecy, it's a responsibility. Every adjustment, every move of those hands is a message. Not give up, the opposite. It's saying you still have agency, the threats are real, the time is short, but the power to choose is still in your hands. That's not despair, that's clarity. And clarity is where all meaningful change begins. We live in an age where the personal and the planetary are inseparable. How you think about responsibility in your own life, whether you take it seriously, whether you act even when it's hard, that's not separate from how humanity collectively responds to existential risk. The clock is ticking, but so is every moment you have to choose differently. The question isn't whether the Doomsday Clock will reach midnight. The question is, what will we have done by then? What conversations will we have started? What systems will we have changed? What responsibility will we have actually taken? That's the clock that matters. The one inside you. The one that measures whether you lived in proportion to what you knew. Subscribe for weekly essays on how ancient wisdom and modern philosophy can ground you in an uncertain world. Because understanding the stakes is only the first step.